Let me take you straight to Manama, right now, because what is unfolding in the Persian Gulf is nothing short of a historic earthquake. In the last few hours, the unthinkable has happened. King Hamad bin Isa Al Khalifa, the man who has ruled Bahrain with an iron fist for nearly 3 decades, has reportedly fled the country. It wasn't a planned state visit, and it wasn't a diplomatic tour. It was an evacuation.
They are determined to make this a permanent place of protest.
1 person has been killed and 8 others have been wounded.
Under the cover of night, as protests turned into an outright revolution, and as Iranian missiles turned the Sheikh Issa airbase into a smoldering ruin, the King of Bahrain ran. He didn't walk, he ran. Witnesses and local sources are confirming that the royal family has been scrambled out of the Rifa Palace, leaving behind a nation that is finally, after decades of sectarian apartheid, rising up to take back what is theirs. This is happening just days after Egyptian President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi was in the country, trying to project an image of stability and alliance. But stability is a lie when you rule a majority Shia population with American bombs and Saudi boots. And that illusion has just shattered. To understand the rage flooding the streets of Manama and Muharraq right now, we have to look at the gasoline that was poured on the fire, the brutal torture and death of a 32-year-old man named Mohammed al-Musawi. This isn't just another name on a long list of victims of the Al Khalifa dictatorship. This is the spark that detonated the powder keg. Mohammed al-Musawi was a prisoner of conscience, a man who had already spent 12 years of his life in the regime's dungeons for daring to demand freedom. He was released in a wave of pardons in 2024, and he spent his brief taste of freedom breathing the air of his homeland. But on March 19th, he was picked up at a security checkpoint in Muharraq. He was taken into custody, and for days his family heard nothing. When his body was finally returned to them yesterday, what they received wasn't a man, it was a mutilated corpse. Videos circulating online, and I warn you, they are graphic, show the face, legs, arms, and feet of Mohammed al-Musawi ravaged by the tools of torture used by the Bahraini Ministry of Interior. This was a man beaten, burned, and broken behind bars. And for what crime? According to the Bahraini dictatorship, he was guilty of espionage and communication with Iran's military. They accused him of being a sleeper agent, of being a traitor to a regime that views the very existence of its Shia majority as an act of treason. They fabricated cells and organizations to justify the murder. But the streets know the truth. Mohammed al-Musawi is the first martyr of this new intifada. His funeral in Muharraq today wasn't a somber procession. It was a war cry. Thousands of mourners turned into protesters, and protesters turned into revolutionaries, flooding past the security forces who are now reportedly retreating to protect what's left of the royal palaces. If you are watching this, you know that the truth is being buried under the rubble of Western propaganda. We are one of the only channels bringing you the raw reality of what is happening in the Persian Gulf. The empire doesn't want you to see these images. They don't want you to know that the people of Bahrain are finally breaking their chains. We need your help to keep this message alive. Hit that like button, not just for the algorithm, but to tell the establishment that we see through their lies. Share this video with everyone you know. Drop a comment. Even if it's just a dot or a single word of solidarity for the people of Bahrain, let them know we are watching. And if you haven't already, subscribe to this channel. Subscribe to support honest journalism. Subscribe because the corporate media will never tell you the truth about the wars being fought in your name. Now, if you want to understand why we are here today, you have to understand the rot at the core of the Al Khalifa dynasty. This is a family that has been clinging to power through a mix of British colonialism, American militarism, and Saudi bribery since the 18th century. But the modern story is the story of a Sunni minority that rules a Shia majority through fear and foreign intervention. King Hamad, who just fled, inherited a country that was always a powder keg. In 2011, during the Arab Spring, the people of Bahrain rose up, occupying the Pearl Roundabout, demanding not to topple the monarchy, but simply to have a constitutional government, a voice, a seat at the table. How did the Al Khalifa respond? They begged Saudi Arabia to invade. The Saudi military rolled across the King Fahd Causeway with tanks and troops, crushed the protest, and helped the Al Khalifa regime impose a brutal security lockdown. That was the moment the West showed its true colors. Obama said nothing. Biden said nothing. Trump, who came later, called the king a great friend. The regime didn't just survive. It thrived because it understood one simple truth. The United States doesn't care about Bahrainis. It cares about the base. So the dynasty has spent the last decade and a half doubling down on sectarian division. They import Sunni mercenaries from Pakistan and Syria to staff the security forces, pitting foreigners against the local Shia population to break any sense of solidarity. They tell Washington that any reform is a victory for Iran, and they use the fear of Tehran to justify the imprisonment of children. It is a house of cards held together by American air power and Saudi oil money. But those cards are falling. Now, let's talk about the elephant in the room, the gaping silence from the Western media, and help the Al Khalifa regime impose a brutal security lockdown. That was the moment the West showed its true colors. Obama said nothing. Biden said nothing. Trump, who came later, called the king a great friend. The regime didn't just survive. It thrived because it understood one simple truth. The United States doesn't care about Bahrainis. It cares about the base. So the dynasty has spent the last decade and a half doubling down on sectarian division. They import Sunni mercenaries from Pakistan and Syria to staff the security forces, pitting foreigners against the local Shia population to break any sense of solidarity. They tell Washington that any reform is a victory for Iran, and they use the fear of Tehran to justify the imprisonment of children. It is a house of cards held together by American air power and Saudi oil money. But those cards are falling. Now, let's talk about the elephant in the room, the gaping silence from the Western media. Where is CNN? Where is the BBC? Where are the headlines demanding democracy and human rights? They are silent. They are mute. And they are mute for one reason, and one reason only. Bahrain hosts the United States Navy Fifth Fleet. That's it. That is the entire explanation for the hypocrisy that stinks to high heaven. For years, the American establishment has fed us a narrative that they are the global champions of freedom, that they weep for the people of Iran under the tyranny of the Islamic Republic. They pour billions into propaganda. They sanction nations. They even launch wars in the name of democracy. They don't see a population crying out for liberation. They see a strategic asset. They see a parking spot for their warships and a launching pad for their illegal genocidal war on Iran. The silence is complicity. The silence is an endorsement of the torture that killed Mohammed al-Musawi. The United States wants democracy for the people of Iran because Iran refuses to bow to Washington. But for Bahrain, a country that acts as a mercenary base for American power, silence is golden and dictatorships are rewarded. And here is where the hypocrisy gets even more absurd. While the Al Khalifa regime is crying about peace and neutrality, claiming they are just a small, peaceful nation trying to stay out of the conflict, they are literally allowing their desert sands to be used as a launch pad for attacks on the Iranian people. For weeks now, the United States has been using Bahraini territory to stage airstrikes against Iran. The Sheikh Issa Air Base, located just south of Manama, has been a central hub for American fighter jets, bombers, and drones that are currently dropping ordnance on Iranian infrastructure. The king stood up and pretended to be a mediator, pretending that Bahrain was a neutral party, a voice of reason. But his country was the forward operating base for an illegal war of aggression. It was only a matter of time before the Iranian military responded. And respond they did. We are now seeing reports that Iranian missiles and drones have devastated the Sheikh Issa Air Base. We're not talking about minor damage. We are talking about the destruction of command centers, the obliteration of aircraft fuel depots, and hangars housing advanced P-8 surveillance aircraft and MQ-9 Reaper drones being blown to pieces. Video footage shows massive plumes of smoke rising over what used to be the headquarters of the U.S. Navy's Central Command. The irony is lost on no one. The king invited the Americans to use his country as a shield to attack Iran. and Iran simply knocked the shield out of his hand. He bet his kingdom on the idea that the US military could protect him. But the US military couldn't even protect its own hangars. As the king flees, the question on everyone's mind is, where is he going? He isn't going to a summer home in Europe. He's going to Saudi Arabia. He's crossing that same causeway that the Saudi tanks used to crush his people back in 2011, but this time, he's running in the opposite direction. He will seek refuge in Riyadh, hoping that his Saudi patrons will find a way to prop him up. But even Riyadh is on fire right now. Saudi Arabia is watching its own Shia population in the eastern province, the province that sits on top of 90% of the kingdom's oil. And those people are watching Bahrain. They are watching their brethren break free. The Saudi National Guard is stretched thin, and the Americans are too busy losing their bases to protect a fallen king. If the Al Khalifa regime collapses entirely, the vacuum left behind is terrifying for Washington. You have a Shia majority population armed with a revolutionary fervor sitting just across the causeway from the world's most important oil fields. The Iranian military does not need to invade. They don't need to send a single soldier. The liberation of Bahrain would be an ideological victory that would send shockwaves through every Gulf monarchy. The United States is terrified of this outcome, and that is why they have been trying desperately for days to hold the regime together. But you cannot hold a dictatorship together with airstrikes when your water supply is gone and your army is melting away. So here we are. King Hamad bin Isa Al Khalifa wanted to be the guardian of a dynasty. Instead, he will be remembered as the man who lost it. He wanted to be the protector of the American empire in the Gulf. Instead, he has become its casualty. The body of Muhammad al-Musawi lies in a grave in Muharraq, but his spirit is marching through the streets of Manama. The American Fifth Fleet is no longer the protector of the regime. It is the target that brought the regime down. And as the sun sets over the Persian Gulf tonight, the people of Bahrain are no longer asking for reform. They are no longer asking for a constitution. They are sweeping away the debris of a dynasty that ruled them with torture, fear, and the silent complicity of the Western world. In the end, the fall of Bahrain will be studied as a case study in hubris. A small island nation, blessed with strategic location, but cursed with a ruling family that valued power over people. They had every opportunity to reform, to share power, to build a real democracy. Instead, they chose torture. They chose apartheid. They chose to be the launchpad for American wars. And now, they are paying the price. The deserts of Bahrain that they rented out to the Americans are now scorched earth. The palaces they built with stolen wealth are now empty. And the people, the same people they accused of being Iranian agents, are walking through the streets, not as agents of a foreign power, but as citizens reclaiming their homeland. The revolution is not just about toppling a king. It is about ending a century of colonial-era rule that never ended. It just changed uniforms. As the sun rises tomorrow, Bahrain may be a different country. One thing is for certain. The Al Khalifa era is over. And the American empire has just lost another key piece of real estate. Not to Iran, but to the will of the people they chose to ignore.